Dear Marcus, I think that whatever I say in this letter, you'll end up hating me. Or maybe end up is a bit too final. Perhaps when you're older, you'll feel something else other than hate. But there's certainly going to be a long period of time where you'll think I did a wrong, stupid, selfish, unkind thing. So I wanted to give myself a chance to explain, even if it doesn't do any good. Listen, a big part of me knows that I'm doing a wrong, stupid, selfish, unkind thing. Most of me, in fact. The trouble is that it's not the part that controls me anymore. That's what's so horrible about the sort of illness I've had for the last few months. It just doesn't listen to anything or anybody else. It just wants to do its own thing. I hope you never get to find out what that's like. None of this is anything to do with you. I've loved being your mom, always, even though it's been hard for me and I found it difficult sometimes. And I don't know why being your mom isn't enough for me, but it isn't. And it isn't that I'm so unhappy I don't want to live anymore. That's not what it feels like. It feels more like I'm tired and bored and the party's gone on too long and I want to go home. I feel flat and there doesn't seem to be anything to look forward to, so I'd rather call it a day. How can I feel like that when I've got you? I don't know. I do know that if I kept it all going just for your sake, you wouldn't thank me, and I reckon that once you got over this, things will be better for you than they were before. Really. You can go to your dad's, or Susie has always said she'll look after you if anything happened to me. I'll watch out for you if I'm able to. I think I will be. I think that when something happens to a mother, she's allowed to do that, even if it's her fault. I don't want to stop writing this, but I can't think of any reason to keep it going. Love you, Mom. They sat in silence for a couple of stops. Marcus looked out of the window and tried to work out how to explain Ellie to his dad. He hardly noticed when the train pulled in at Royston Station, and he wasn't even completely alert when Ellie suddenly stood up and jumped off the train. He hesitated for a moment. Then, with a horrible sick feeling, he jumped off after her. "What are you doing?" "I don't want to go to Cambridge. I don't know your dad." "You didn't know him before, and you wanted to come then?" "That was before. Everything's different now." He followed her. He wasn't going to let her out of his sight. They walked out of the station, up a side road, and then onto the high street. They walked past a chemist and a greengrocer's and a Tesco, and then they came to a record shop which had a big cardboard cutout of Kurt Cobain in the window. "Look at that," said Ellie. "Bastards. They're trying to make money out of him already." She took off one of her boots and threw it at the glass as hard as she could. She cracked it first time, and Marcus found himself thinking about how shop windows in Royston were much weedier than shop windows in London before he realized what was going on. "Shit! Ellie!" She picked up the boot and used it as a hammer, carefully smashing a hole big enough to lean through without hurting herself, and rescued Kurt Cobain from his record shop prison. There, he's out. She sat down on the curb outside the shop, holding Kurt to her as if he were a ventriloquist dummy, and smiling this weird little smile to herself. Meanwhile, Marcus panicked. He charged up the road, intending to run all the way back to London or on to Cambridge, whichever direction he was heading. After a few yards, however, his legs went all shaky and he stopped, took a few deep breaths, and went back to sit with her. "What did you do that for?" "I don't know. It just didn't seem right, him being in there on his own." Oh, Ellie. Once again, Marcus was left with the feeling that Ellie didn't have to do what she had just done, and that she had brought the trouble she was in upon herself. He was tired of it. It wasn't real, and there was enough trouble in the world without having to invent things. The street had been quiet when Ellie broke the window, but the noise of breaking glass had woken Royston up, and a couple of people closing up their shops had run down to see what was going on.
"What do you fancy?" "I don't know. It's got to be Adidas, I think." "Why?" "Because that's what everyone wears." The shoes were displayed according to manufacturer, and the Adidas section of the shop was attracting more than its fair share of shoppers. "Sheep," said Marcus as they were approaching. "Bah." "Where'd you get that from?" "That's what my mom says when she thinks people haven't got a mind of their own." Will suddenly remembered that a boy at his old school had had a mom like Fiona. Not exactly like her, because it seemed to Will that Fiona was a peculiarly contemporary creation, with her 70s albums, her 80s politics, and her 90s foot lotion, but certainly a 60s equivalent of Fiona. Stephen Fullock's mother had a thing about TV that it turned people into androids, so they didn't have a set in the house. "Did you see?" Will would say every Monday morning, and then remembered and blush as if the TV were a parent who had just died. And what good had it done to Stephen Fullock? He was not, as far as Will was aware, a visionary poet or a primitive painter. He was probably stuck in some provincial solicitor's office, like everyone else from school. He had endured years of pity for no discernible purpose. The whole idea of this expedition, Marcus, is that you learn to become a sheep. It is? Of course. You don't want anyone to notice you. You don't want to look different. Bah. Will picked out a pair of Adidas basketball boots that looked cool but relatively unshowy. "What do you think of them?" "They're 60 pounds. "Never mind how much they cost. What do you think of them?" "Yeah, good." Will grabbed an assistant and asked him to bring the right size, and Marcus stomped up and down for a while. He looked at himself in the mirror and tried to repress a smile. "You think you look cool, don't you?" said Will. "Yeah, except now the rest of me looks all wrong. So next time, we'll make sure the rest of you looks okay." Marcus went straight home afterwards, his boots stuffed into a school bag. Will walked back beaming at his own munificence. So this was what people meant by a natural high. He couldn't recall having felt like this before, so at peace with himself, so convinced of his own self-worth. And, unbelievably, it only cost him 60 quid. How much would he have had to pay for an equivalent unnatural high? Probably about 25 quid, thinking about it, but unnatural highs were indisputably inferior. He had made an unhappy boy temporarily happy, and there hadn't been anything in it for him at all. He didn't even want to sleep with the boy's mother. "He just seems so much older," Fiona said one afternoon, after Will had dropped him off and he had disappeared into his bedroom with a cursory thank you and a brusque hello to his mother. "Where did we go wrong, eh?" Will asked plaintively. "We've given that boy everything, and this is how he repays us." "I feel as though I'm losing him," said Fiona. Will still hadn't gotten the hang of joking with her. What left his mouth with the weight and substance of froth on a cappuccino seemed to enter her ear like a suet pudding. "It's all Smashing Pumpkins and Ellie and Zoe, and I think he's been smoking." Will laughed. "It's not funny." "It is, kind of. How much would you have given for Marcus to be caught smoking with his mates a few months ago?" "Nothing. I abhor smoking." "Yes, but..." He gave up. Fiona was determined not to see the point he was trying to make. "Does it bother you that you're losing him?" "Why do you ask that?" "Of course it bothers me. It's just that you've seen... I don't want to be crude about it, but you've seen better recently." "I think I am. I don't know what it is, but I just feel less worn down by everything." "That's great. I think I'm just on top of things more. I don't know why." Will thought he knew one of the reasons why, but he also knew that it would be neither wise nor kind to elaborate. The truth was that this version of Marcus really wasn't so hard to cope with. He had friends. He could look after himself. He had developed a skin, the kind of skin Will had just shed. He had flattened out and became as robust and as unremarkable as every other 12-year-old kid. But all three of them to lose those things in order to gain other things. Will had lost his shell and his cool and his distance, and he felt scared and vulnerable. But he got to be with Rachel, and Fiona had lost a big chunk of Marcus, and she got to stay away from the casualty ward. And Marcus had lost himself, and got to walk home from school with his shoes on. Marcus came out of his room scowling. "I'm bored. Can I go and get a video?" Will couldn't resist. He had a theory he wanted to test out. "Hey Fiona, why don't you get your sheet music out and we can murder both sides now?" "Would you like to?" "Yeah, sure." But he was watching Marcus, whose expression was that of a boy who had been asked to dance naked before a mixed audience of supermodels and cousins. "Please, Mom, don't. Don't be silly. You love singing. You love Joni Mitchell." "I don't. Not anymore. I bloody hate Joni Mitchell." Will knew then, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that Marcus would be okay.